thank you so much for praying for us. I believe the pastor wanted me to share a little bit about what we do. I am with the Gospel Preacher Association. I've been with them 27 years, I believe. 1990, that would be 27 years, right? And before that, I was with the Macedonia World Baptist Missions. I was a European director in Europe and started churches in England and Europe. And then I came home and became a missions director for the Gospel Preacher Association. Did that for a number of years, but I just really missed starting churches. I have met pastors who would have a nervous breakdown if they thought they had to go somewhere where they didn't know anybody and didn't have anything, and they were going to start a church there. Well, it thrills my soul. I just love it. I just have a heart for it. Sometimes there's nobody but Miss Judy for me to preach to, but I let her have the whole load. I don't cut back. I don't cut back least bit. Sometimes she doesn't give as much as I think she ought to. But so I've been starting churches in the Midwest. This next church will be our fourth church that we've started. We've completed 3. As far as I know, they're all still going with the pastor. Thank God for that. And we're up in near between Dubuque and Dyersville in Peosta. I don't know why I'm there. That wasn't where I intended to go, but that's where I've ended up at. We gave out some leaflets through the paper. They inserted 8,000 of them around Dyersville. And in the process of that, I met some people who had been meeting for a year in the basement of a house. There's really just 2 families and then parts of families. They were originally part of a church in Dubuque that had been in existence for 18 years, but the church never had a building, never had property. One of the advantages of having a church planter like me, I'm supported by churches like you, and therefore I don't take any money from the churches that I start. They don't pay me anything. They don't give me a housing allowance or car allowance or any other kind of allowance. So all the money that comes in goes into savings that's not needed for the church. Every church that I've started, we start with Faith Promise. And the one over in Anamosa supports 16 missionaries by Faith Promise. No money comes out of the general treasury for missions at all. And all of that money went into savings. And when I left there, we had a building and property paid for and debt-free, and I left them with $50,000 in the bank. And I think they've increased it to $60,000 now. And just ordinary people just giving and doing the Lord's work, and I'm thankful for that. I pastored for about 10 years, or was assistant pastor and pastor for about 10 years before the Lord called me into missions back in 1981. When you sang that song tonight, I Am Resolved, reminded me. The first church I pastored, I'd only been saved about 3 years, had not been to Bible college at all. I do everything backwards. Most preachers go to Bible college to get ready to get a church. Well, I had a church before I went to Bible college. But I didn't have all the good sense in the world I needed, I guess. And it was a new building, but it was out in the country. They had deer stands in the front and the back of the church. There was not a house in sight, but it was a brand new brick church, beautiful. No bathrooms, no central heat, had 2 paths, and it was country folks. Anyway, there wasn't hardly anybody there, and I made the mistake of telling them that when we got to 50 in Sunday school that I would sing. I don't sing. So I finally got a concession that Miss Judy could sing with me, and that's the song that I chose, I Am Resolved. But I made an immediate announcement after the song that when we got to 75, the deacons would sing. I'd had enough of that. So that's what I do. We're supportive missionaries, and we've been at it for a long time. God has blessed us, and I'm thankful to be used in any capacity. But I enjoy what I do. I don't want to quit doing what I'm doing. I could retire, but I don't want to retire. Why should I quit doing what I want to do something I don't want to do? So as long as I got sense enough and strength enough, I want to continue to start churches as the Lord will allow me to do it. So we're over in Peosta, and I'm meeting with them just one service a week right now, and they're going to come to a decision about what to do with me and what I'm going to do with them in the very near future. So we'll see. I am thankful that they're there. I did not get hardly any response from the literature that I put out. I think primarily because it's a really highly Catholic area. And I think that they're not really interested in an independent Baptist church. As a matter of fact, I'm pretty sure that's the case. But, you know, I have to do what the Lord wants me to do. I'm not there, you know, just because of the need. I'm there because God has burdened my heart to go there. And I intend to stay as long as He gives me grace and strength to stay. I hope this works out with these people that I'm with. I've learned to love them. One of the things that I really liked about this very small group is when they lost their church building and had to begin to meet in this basement of a house, they continued to support all 7 of their missionaries. And they support them, continue to support them now. So that's a good testimony. I don't know anything about what went on. I really don't need to know. Matter of fact, I was thinking about having a funeral service. Just bury all that old church and all those old grievances and just start over again. That might be good. I followed a fellow named Joe one time. Joe was a young preacher, a good preacher and a good man, but the church got into a mess and he got discouraged and just left with nowhere to go. And I came in as pastor of that mess, and everybody kept telling me what Brother Joe did and how Brother Joe did this and Brother Joe did that. So I got up one morning and I said, I have an announcement. Listen to me carefully. Brother Joe is gone, and Brother Don is here now. Let's just get on with God's business and serve the Lord. Well, I'm thankful for missions. I love missions. When I pastored that first church, I did not know where to find a missionary. I had never met a live missionary. I didn't even know what one looked like. We were saved in the Southern Baptist Church, and all they had was Lottie Moon, and I never met her. And when I began to pastor, I wanted to support missionaries, but I didn't know how, and I didn't know where to find a missionary. And one of the ways I did it was I had them cut my salary. They paid me on a percentage basis. And I agreed to it, but there were stipulations. They paid me 80% of the offering every Sunday except the 5th Sunday. And the 5th Sunday, it went into the building fund. Of course, when I went there, the first offering was about $30. But within a month or a couple of months, the offerings were running well over 200, sometimes 300, 350. I was doing pretty good. You know, I was getting 80% of the offering. I was working full time, and I was drawing VA. So I was doing real good. And I asked them, it would be all right if I just cut my salary and we took that money and gave it to missions. And of course, they agreed to that, and that's how we started. And just supporting missionaries. And I went to Bible college while I was there. And wouldn't you know it, in the altar praying one night, I got right beside of a missionary. And he was praying. He had some tire problems. He said, oh, God. Now, he's a redneck. He said, oh, God, my tires are like peeled onions, he said. And he said, I need some tars, he said. He was praying. And I had the grocer money, and when he got up, I just gave him the money. I said, go get you some tires, you know. And God blessed me for doing that to missions, and He'll bless you. Amen. If you do it with a good heart, He'll bless you. How many of you ladies cook? Raise your hand. You cook. I don't mean down at the McDonald's now. I mean cook. If you do, you know that ingredients are important, are they not? Having the right ingredients for whatever you're going to cook in the right proportion at the right time. Isn't that right? My mother never had a recipe, I don't think. She made everything from scratch. I never did see a box of scratch, but she made it from scratch. And but many ladies, my wife and others, cook from recipes. And you gotta keep it right. You got to get it right. Success in faith promise giving, success in every area of the Christian life that I can think of, and usually in most of life's situations. If you're going to be successful, there are 3 ingredients that you absolutely must have. Number 1 is want to. You're not going to be successful if you don't want to. And how much want to you have Depends on how hard you work at being successful. I've met men who were athletic, could play ball, could have been on a professional team, but they just didn't really want to go to that much trouble. They just enjoyed playing ball, and they weren't going to knuckle down and hone their skills. Musicians are the same way. There are people who could play a piano, they have the ear to play, they have the ability to play, but they really just don't want to practice all that much. They just don't want to be something of a great pianist if it requires all that practice. Want to is important. Faith, promise, giving. If you don't want to give, you're not going to enjoy this meeting. You're not going to enjoy what the Bible says or what I say. But if you have a want to give, then listen, because the next step is how to. You need to know how to. You know, if you want to do something, I don't care what it is, if it's count cross stitch or if it's hunt deer or whatever you want to do, you need to learn how to do that. Isn't that right? If you want to be a success in anything, you need to learn how to do it, how to do it right. If you're going to be a seamstress, I can remember my wife, at one time we didn't have a whole lot of money. Well, at no time did we have a lot of money, but sometimes we had less money than others. And she began to make shirts for the family and clothes for herself. And she learned how to do that. She worked at it, and she did a great job at it. And, you know, if you have a want to do something, then the next thing is to learn how to. Did you know that a lot of the preaching that's done from this pulpit and every pulpit, if it's a good pastor, is about how to? How to pray more, how to be a better Christian, how to win souls, how to support missions, how to understand the Bible. A lot of the preaching is how to. Did you know the people who don't have want to don't enjoy how to? They get bored with how to because they really don't want to. And the third ingredient is this one. It's follow through. And you find it, I appreciate the pastor, not every pastor follows the Lord as close as you do. He read my text tonight. And he expounded most of it, so I don't have much left to preach. Chapter number 8 of 2 Corinthians. Keep your Bibles open and handy. We'll be looking in several places. I'll be just as brief as I can be. But you'll see all of those ingredients that was in the church at Macedonia. Now, Macedonia was a section, like a county, that had been carved out by the Roman government, and there were several towns in Macedonia. Thessalonica was there, and Berea was there, and others were there. And these people had been approached by Paul, been instructed by Paul to take an offering, to receive an offering for the poor saints in Jerusalem. Hold your place there and let me catch you up on that so you'll see what I'm talking about. Look in Romans chapter number 15, if you would, and hold your place in 2 Corinthians, Romans chapter 15, verse number 26. We're jumping way ahead of the events. Paul is now taking the money that has been collected from the churches in Greece, in Achaia, and in Macedonia. Notice what he says in verse 26. For it have pleased them of Macedonia and Achaia to make a certain contribution for the poor saints, which are at Jerusalem. That's what the offering was for. Giving is a divine principle. Giving is a biblical principle. Faith promise giving is a method of giving. There are many ways to give. Faith promise giving is different in the method that's used in the giving. Now turn over, keep your place in 2 Corinthians now, the 1 Corinthians chapter number 16, if you would. And you'll see that Paul had been to Corinth and had been to Macedonia and had instructed them. Matter of fact, everywhere he went, he instructed them about the need for the poor saints in Jerusalem. Look at verse number 1 of chapter 16 of the book of 1 Corinthians. Now concerning the collection for the saints. What kind of saints? The poor saints. There are some religions, and I won't name any, that are absolutely filthy rich. I mean, they have millions and billions of dollars worth of property and paintings and jewels and all kinds of things. And yet they continually try to get more and more money out of the people. These were poor saints. These were saints that were in real need. As I said the other night, they had used everything they had, and some of the men, like Barnabas, was even selling property they had and bringing that money and giving it to the apostles to use to help the entire congregation that was in need. Many of them did not live in Jerusalem. They had traveled there for the great feast, the Passover, another feast, and they didn't go home. They stayed there. And they were in dire straits. They needed help. And he had been instructed by the apostles, and I won't turn there, but in Galatians chapter 2 and verse number 10, he said that they told him to keep in mind this need of the saints in Jerusalem. And he said, this I was willing to do. I'm paraphrasing. So when Paul went out, he made them aware. There's nothing wrong with making a need known. That's not begging for money. That's not trying to connive somebody into doing something. When you make a need known, if it's a genuine need, then you need to make that need known so that people can pray for you and so that God can move on somebody's heart, perhaps to help you with the need that you have. So he said, now concerning, verse number 1, the collection for the saints, as I have given order or instruction to the churches of Galatia. Galatia is sort of the middle part of what is now modern-day Turkey. Back then, it was part of the Roman Empire, and Galatia contained several cities. He said, even so do ye. Now, he's talking to Corinth, which is in Greece. It's in the southern part of Greece. Macedonia is in the northern part of Greece, and he's giving them the instructions about this giving that he's talking about in 2 Corinthians chapter number 8. Notice what he said, upon the first day of the week. Which day is that? Where should Christians be on the first day of the week? In church, absolutely. Unless you're providentially hindered. And he said, upon the first day of the week, let every one of you lay by him in store as God has prospered him. No two of us have exactly the same circumstances. We don't have exactly the same kind of savings or income. We're all different to some degree. It is only natural that some people can give more than other people. But God watches and knows what everybody gives. Matter of fact, the one person I remember him commenting on is the widow who gave everything she had. That sort of impressed him. Those rich folks throwing in them $100 bills and wads of money didn't impress them all that much. They were giving out of their abundance, but she gave out of her need. She didn't have anything left when she gave. So he said, as the Lord has prospered you, in that verse, or prospered him, he says, that there be no gatherings when I come. And when I come, whomsoever you shall approve by your letters, them will I send to bring your liberality or the money, the offering, unto Jerusalem. Now, why would he have to send somebody to get the money to bring it to Jerusalem? Well, he didn't have a Walmart that you can go down and get a money order and send it anywhere in the world. There's a Walmart, and it'll be there in 30 minutes. My wife has a sister in England. If she wanted to send her money, I'm not putting any ideas in her head, but if she wanted to send her money, she could go down to Walmart, pay for that money order, and they electronically would send that over to England or any Walmart anywhere in the world, and her sister could take that number and go there and get that money. They'd count out the money to her. You see that? Plus, you can send by mail. Paul had none of that. In this day and time, they had none of that. The only way to get money from one place to another was physically carry that money with you. That's why it was so dangerous to travel. That's why most of the people traveled in groups, because there were robbers who waited along the highways and byways, and when somebody came along that they thought they could overpower, then they would attack them, like the man who was left by the wayside. They would attack them and take the money from them because they knew that if they had any money, it would be with them. There was no other way to transfer it. So they had to collect the money and wait, and Paul said he would come by and they could send somebody. Why do you think Paul wanted them to send somebody with him and the money? He wanted them to know it was going to where he said it was going. When you send your money to a television preacher, you have no idea where that money goes. I have been in some independent Baptist churches. You give your money, you don't have any idea what they do with it. It's like it's a major secret what they do with God's money. But here Paul said he was accountable. There were checks and balances. I believe that money given to missions ought to go to missions. I don't believe it ought to be used to pay the parking lot or paint the rooms. I believe if it's given and designated to missions, it ought to go to missions, every dime of it. Say amen right there, because it's the truth. Otherwise, you end up like Jim Baker. You raise money for one thing and you spend it for another, and that's called misappropriation of funds, and that's why he went to jail. He raised money for needs and ended up having gold-plated faucets, and they'd fly over in a Lear jet over to Paris to have breakfast in Paris with the money people were sending in to help in special needs. Paul didn't want to do that. And you don't want to do that. Your pastor doesn't want to do that. God help us if we're not honest and above board with finances in this world. What did the Bible say? The love of money is the root of all evil. People are motivated by what they love. And there are people who love money and they're motivated by it. And there I said that and lost my place. 2 Corinthians chapter 8. Your pastor shared how that Macedonia was being used because Corinth did not follow through. You read chapter 9, you'll see they had to want to. They were forward a year ago, he said. They wanted to give an offering to these poor saints. He instructed them how to give that offering. Every week, on the first day of the week, they were to set that money aside and keep their hands off of it and keep adding to it until the time that someone came by to pick it up in a year's time. You remember verse number 7 of chapter number 9. It says, every man according as he purposed in his heart, so let him give, not grudgingly or of necessity, for God loveth a cheerful giver. He's not talking about giving the tithe. You don't have to pray about how much of a tithe to give. A tithe is a tithe. Isn't that right? 10%. A lady asked me one time, should I tithe off the net or off the gross? I said, do you want a net blessing or you want a gross blessing? So he's talking about giving to the poor saints in Jerusalem. He says that, that they need to purpose and settle that in your heart. I'm persuaded, it has been true in my life, not every year in the 40 years that I've been giving the faith promise, not every year has the Lord asked me to give more than I gave the last year. Sometimes you may only have peace to give less than you gave last year. But if it's the will of God for you to give more, you ought to give more. If it's the will of God for you to give less, you listen to God. You don't know what's ahead in your life. You don't know what needs you're going to have, but God does. So he said Corinth was in trouble. Look what he said in verse number 5. Therefore I thought it necessary to exhort the brethren that they would go up before unto you and make up beforehand your bounty or your blessing, the money, whereof ye had noticed before, that the same might be ready as a matter of bounty, not as of covetousness. Paul had gotten word that they were not being faithful. They had to want to, they knew how to, but they did not follow through. You see, one of the things that's great about faith promise giving, you don't give it all at one time. You give it week by week or bi-weekly, ever how you give your money, but you don't give it all in one chunk. My stars, it'd be tough. If you're going to give $100 a week, that'd be $5,200 to give it one check, you know. Who could do that in here? If you could, let me see you after the service. I need to talk to you. But you see, faith promise is giving week by week. You make a commitment. You pray, you seek the Lord's will, and if you have a card, I don't know how this church does it. If you have a card, you fill it out, and you promise, that's why they call it faith promise. You promise to give faithfully in the coming year X amount of money towards missions. It doesn't have anything in the world to do with your tithe. It doesn't have anything to do with what you might give an offering to an evangelist or meet the need of some person in the community. It doesn't have anything to do with any other giving. This is giving, just giving for the cause of missions. It is what I call an others offering. It's different from what's used in the church. You've done marvelous things here. I remember when this ceiling didn't look like this. I remember when some of you didn't look like this. You've gotten older. Your pastor's done a great job working on this church, not only with the people, but with the property. I remember when the parking lot wasn't paved. Don't you? I parked in number 2 hole right over there. So here he's found out that Corinth has fallen by the wayside. Let me ask you something. Why do you think Corinth was not keeping up with their faith promise? What do we know about that church that might indicate they were preoccupied with some other things? You see, the devil's a master at trying to get us off the main thing and get on some other thing. They were having trouble in the church, immorality in the church, all kinds of things going on in the church, and they had just failed to be faithful with their faith promise. Doesn't mean that everybody was, but there's enough that Paul was concerned that they would not have the money they had promised. And what made it even worse, guess what Paul did when he went to Macedonia from Corinth? He went bragging to them about what Corinth was going to do. Guess what he does now in chapter 8? Macedonia. Look at what it says. Your pastor read it, so I'll just sort of drift over a little bit. He says, moreover, brethren, we do you to wit, or we make you aware of the grace of God bestowed on the churches of Macedonia. You and I, we have access to the grace of God. Amen. You understand that? How much grace does God have? More than you'll ever need. More than I'll ever need. Where sin did abound, grace did much more abound. Isn't that right? Hold your place there and turn over to Romans chapter 5. And how do you access this grace that God has for us? Grace in giving, grace in going, grace in winning souls, grace in understanding the Bible. Look what it says in chapter number 5 and verse number 2. He says, by whom, in the context, he's talking about by the Lord Jesus Christ, by whom also we have access. By what? Faith. So what is your access to the grace that is yours? Faith. Our faith. That's how you get it from over there to in here where you need it. How many of you have a debit card? Don't raise your hand. That debit card gives you access to your money. Isn't that right? You go down anywhere in America, anywhere overseas. And you can go to one of those things and punch a certain numbers and it goes spitting out money to you. If you got any in there for it to spit out. If not, you put up your debit card and get out your credit card and it'll spin you some more out there. But you have access by that card and the access code that you have. Well, our access to the grace of God is faith. You have faith. If you're saved, you couldn't get saved without faith. It is by grace through faith. It is faith that gave us access to the grace that saves us. And this church in Macedonia, they were giving by the grace of God. The grace of God had been bestowed upon them, and they had accessed that grace by faith. And here's the odd thing. Corinth had money, and they were in a really urban area. They were famous for all kinds of things. They weren't poor folks. Macedonia's up north. And Macedonia doesn't have what Corinth has. And these saints in the church in Macedonia were poor saints. Look what it says in that verse number 2. How that in a great trial of affliction, the abundance of their joy and their deep poverty. Now, I don't know how poor is people who are in deep poverty.